a lot of clear skies today, at least what you can see on the ground. And with that in mind, what's going on today? It's kind of interesting reading this one. Apparently, I guess in some places they're going to start pushing things like drones to transport people. This one says, now a drone that can carry humans. Seems like a lot of companies are trying to race to be the first per se. It says, Indian Institute of Technology, Hyderabad, is going to test a drone that can carry humans in autopilot mode. Speaking to reporters after inaugurating an exhibition on World of PAVs at the campus at Kandy in Sangareddy district on Friday, IITH Director B.S. Murty said that they would be testing the unmanned vehicle on July 4th in presence of the Union Minister of the State for Science and Technology, Jitendra Singh. That's coming really soon then. And it says a self-driven electric cycle will also be inaugurated by the Institute shortly. One can book this cycle that can come to a person on its own. The customer can leave it after reaching the destination as it will return to the booking office in autopilot mode. Models of personal aerial vehicles were exhibited by the design department at the expo. A lot of people would say that's how the future is going to be in terms of cars and so forth for a lot of people, where they will just, I guess, hail it, it'll come to you, and then afterwards it'll automatically go back to the owner. That's the assumption anyways. I guess potentially that would happen with things like drones too. I wouldn't doubt it wouldn't happen. And reading this made me think, is it always, I guess, the recreational pilot is the one that's demonized, but anyone using it for what, commercial or combat reasons, for example, get all the benefits? This one says, bill would give drone pilots same tax-free status as soldiers in combat zones. New federal legislation would give drone operators stationed on American soil the same tax benefits given to soldiers stationed in a combat zone. And I guess these senators in the US, as it announced legislation Wednesday that would expand the combat zone tax exclusion to remotely piloted aircraft crews operating missions in combat zones. The eligibility would allow Air Force remotely piloted aircraft missions flown out of Nevada's Creech Air Force Base in Indian Springs to qualify. The CZTE protects enlisted members' income from taxation if they spend even a single qualifying day in a combat zone. The exemption also applies to warrant officers and officers, though it's capped for the latter. States that follow the Internal Revenue Service's tax code on either a rolling or static conformity would also exempt the income. It says the bipartisan legislation would ensure that service members at Creech Air Force Base conducting remotely piloted aircraft operations in combat zones are eligible for the same tax benefits as others serving in combat zones. Although with that in mind, this is kind of an interesting statement. I did read before where I guess like a drone operator, they can't retain the talent for whatever reason. It says, the Nevada Democrats said in a news release that RPA crews face retention and mental health problems due to the stressors and intensity of their missions. It's kind of an interesting thing to say, I guess, overall, and in relation to this, is that supposed to alleviate, I guess, that issue? And it says here, quote, these service members experience similar stressors to their colleagues who are physically overseas and see similar horrible events play out and deserve to be treated as such. This legislation will provide drone crews with a combat zone tax exemption while they are actively supporting combat operations from domestic locations. And in terms of things like legislation, this was all over the place here, even though this was a US story. It says here, US Supreme Court overturns protections for abortions set out in Roe v Wade. The US Supreme Court has overturned the Roe v Wade opinion that has secured constitutional protections for abortion in the US for nearly 50 years. The milestone ruling, a draft which was leaked last month, has the potential to claw back abortion access across the country by allowing states to restrict or outright ban the procedure. Friday's 6-3 decision delivered by Justice Samuel Alito, with all three liberal justices dissenting, reverses the historic 1973 Roe v Wade decision. The original ruling found that a woman's decision to terminate a pregnancy was protected by the right to privacy that flows from the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution, which protects the citizen's right to life, liberty, and property. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any Constitution provisions. And to my knowledge, with these topics, usually the controversy is when is it considered, I guess, as a quote, living person per se. It says the state could only interfere with that right, the court found, after a fetus reached the viability stage, around 22 to 24 weeks of pregnancy, when the fetus could be considered viable outside the womb. The case before the court, Dobbs v. Jackson's women's health organization, centered on a Mississippi law banning abortion after 15 weeks. And just from reading general comments and so forth, there seems to be arguments where people who are for this, for example, they're against things that are, I guess, related, where people are making choices about their own body, but they encourage, for example, restrictions in that way, but not this. So there's the argument in that sense. At the same time, I guess when it comes to these topics, it probably is a lot more complicated overall in terms of if you want to get into that debate of what's considered as, I guess, a living child afterwards once it's born. Then some people will argue if someone got an unwanted pregnancy, let's just say from a rape or something like that, should they have the rights to, I guess, abort the child per se? And then there's other arguments saying, well, there was a lot of children who were born because of, let's just say, unfortunate or unexpected situations like that, and they turned out to be, I guess, model citizens and all that. So overall, I wouldn't be surprised if this creates mass, I guess, controversy and maybe protests with two sides basically not agreeing. Alright, see you guys later.